So really wonderful to be here. This is not the first time I have been involved with a dual language event. The first one takes me back to 1990, when my good friend from school very sensibly was marrying a lovely Parisian lady, and the wedding was in France. And I felt, as I started my best man speech, I ought to apologize for not speaking in the language of the country that I was in. And I decided at that moment, things have moved on a little bit, at the moment France was very signed up for the Maastricht Treaty and the whole EU project. So Margaret Thatcher, who was then the Prime Minister, wasn't terribly popular in those areas. So I apologise for not speaking French by blaming the policies of the former Education Minister, Margaret Thatcher. And I felt that this was, the fact is I was lazy and I just couldn't speak French. And I've always really focused on one language, which I try and do quite well. Anyway, there was an unexpected outcome when all the French were, thought, yeah, there's anti-Thatcher remarks, so all the French would go, yay, vive Anglais, and all this sort of thing. Some of the English people go, what on earth are you on about? But I have been on a steep and wonderful and very, very welcome learning curve this morning. It is my first trip to Northern Ireland. It is my first time in Belfast, and I've always wanted to come here. And it is wonderful now to do that in the capacity as chairing the Community Media Association. And my knowledge so far indicates the meaning of the word Fáilte, and that is exactly what I have received. My new friend Paul over here and Fergus last night taking me out for a modest imbibing of the Irish stout and a little bit of music, and I understand there's going to be more of the same this evening. So a very quick word about the Community Media Association, which this year is in its 40th year, so it's nearly as old as me. It is the national representative organisation for this thing that we now call community media. But for those of us who have had a career in radio broadcasting, we substitute, it's really about radio. But that said, all aspects of non-profit media or what I call media with social purpose, the antithesis of commercial media, commercial-orientated media, which is actually our general perception of what the media is. And I've got no problem or issue with commercial media. A long and honourable history of people who are needing to sell newspapers, holding local elected representatives to account. But I do have a particular warmth, for very obvious reasons, to the kinds of media organisations, which is where we are today, which is all about the opportunities and strengthening communities. I can't think of a better example of that, and that is what the Community Media Association is there to represent, with stakeholders, which would include government and the BBC, also the Radio Academy. And I've just stepped down from the board. I think I'm the only person who's ever served on both the Community Media Association and the Radio Academy board. So, and I'd like to look into a little bit more, whilst I'm here, about the Radio Academy's relationship with Northern Ireland, because that may be something to kind of elevate. Wonderful going upstairs with Fergus a moment ago, seeing the level of awards that Raidió Fáilte has been given. And I noted with wonderful satisfaction that you got the Academy Award, Radio Academy Award 2013, presumably for Northern Ireland. That was the Nations and Regions Award, which as a trustee of the Academy I've been campaigning to bring back, because I think the awards and recognition process isn't as good without it. And but that was a year that Summer Valley FM, the station I started and ran for 13 years, got it for the Southwest. So I took a special photograph, and that will be the subject of a happy and gladsome tweet at a later point. I first became aware of this radio station and your work here through the Community Radio Awards, which I compared the first Community Radio Awards, and 2 years later I was judging, and then I went through the nomination for what the radio station successfully got, which was the Community Radio Station of the Year. And I'd like to underwrite what an extraordinary achievement that was, because I'm involved, I'm a head judge at the ARIAs, I'm involved with a number of awards and recognition process, and they're never going to be perfect. You can start with the right spirit and ethos, but you're never going to absolutely get it perfect. But to have won Radio Station of the Year with a non-English speaking language was an extraordinary achievement, given the fact that presumably 99% of the people looking at that application, that nomination, didn't have the Irish language. So that is a testament, I think, to the strength of what this radio station does. And I remember listening to this and listening to the audio and reading the transcription. I thought, yeah, this is it. So I wasn't at all surprised when they won Community Radio Station of the Year, and that's when I met my good friend Fergus here. Flip forward a little bit, and this is my second time as chair of the Community Media Association, 5-year gap in between, how the world changed in that period. But one of the things I was very keen to do, and this was supported by our council, was to come up with a community media version of the Radio Academy's fellowship concept. And they're sort of creating a network of people who should get recognition for going above and beyond. We are in a volunteer sector. Volunteers are everything in community media and community radio. But every now and again you come across people who've just gone even above and beyond the marvellous goodwill and energy and creativity that comes from volunteers. And that's what this process is all about. So we launched it in 2022 at the Community Media Festival. And it always amuses me when a media organisation slightly messes up on its communications, and the marvellous thing is that we were all applauding Fergus like fury at the University of Bedfordshire last May, and he didn't know about it. So someone slipped up there. It matters not. We're here today, and I just want to focus a little bit on why Fergus is receiving this award. The nomination came from Bill Best, who served the CMA for over 20 years, and a great loss when his positive progression took him to a new company. He's still very, very involved in the organisation, and the CMA is doing really well. Actually, it's sort of it's reaffirming everything that is positive about its own past and taking that forward, building resources, more representation, so that we can help with the challenges. But we can also help with the celebrations and the success. So do look out for the Community Media Festival that is coming later in the year, and we'll keep in very, very close contact. I'm actually stepping down as the chair of the CMA at the end of this month at our AGM, but I'm very much going to be continuing these visits, and my charity Sound Vision will continue to support these awards going forward. So you're not quite getting rid of me. And I thrive on going around the country to see the kind of work that I've been witnessing here this morning, and it really is fantastic to see. I'm going to come back to the management of the radio station and tell them which number radio station of my visits are, but it's well over 130, and I'm not including the ones I worked for before I moved into community radio. I'd like to share with you, before I make the presentation, Bill Best's nomination of this award. It is for Fergus O'Hare, for his role in establishing Radio. Just a caveat of apology for all pronunciations. There we go. Raidió Fáilte, and providing Irish Gaelic services to the Irish-speaking community in Belfast. I think we're going to hear from Fergus that actually the brief is a bit bigger than that. But this is Bill's reason for making the nomination, which, by the way, was unanimously accepted by council, which is the decision-making body on this. There's absolutely no controversy about this one at all. Fergus was also involved in the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland as a member of People's Democracy in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Later became a founding member and executive member of the Northern Resistance Movement, which continued to campaign for civil rights in Northern Ireland. He's also served, if that wasn't enough, on Belfast City Council. And what I love about this nomination it is about somebody who's gone above and beyond in the context of community radio. But really, that is a very abbreviated CV of all sorts of extraordinary contributions to the positive life of this city and what it stands for. Fergus, you know you're getting this, but you haven't seen it yet, and it is my great pleasure to present to you the Community Media Champions Award.
Very much. Raidió Fáilte is a prime example of the important work that's going on, and the vigorous, the determination and the hard work which the people in here do, way and above, quite often away and above what workers in other places would do. Owen O'Neill, who works night, noon and morning, doing a show in the morning, a show at lunchtime, and was doing other shows as well. If he were to be on half the salary or half the rate that the likes of a person whom I won't mention, but he broadcasts every morning on a certain local station, Owen would be a billionaire by the stage. Maybe he is, maybe he just hasn't told it. Anyway, an obair dígrach atá go anseo, the dedication of the workers in Raidió Fáilte to bring this to fruition from whenever garage, and Owen and a couple of other people, when we started, or when the station was started in the Art School, which was just down there, again part of the history of this place, and we won't mention what happened to the Art School. We won't put the blame on anybody, but it did go up in flames. From that right up through the Culturland and the Common Cluanard, Bohershoy, the schools, and all of that work. This is an important part of that. If you're trying to build a language community, you need a means of communication within the community, and therefore the man-comer side, media is extremely important. And Garage certainly has been very focused on that aspect of the Irish language, amongst other things, in his time. And Myra and other people who have been involved in all that sort of stuff, Anya with the shop, and all of the people who've been working here to build the Irish language. This award, I see it as recognition of all that work that they've been doing. And I was just saying then very briefly, why is it important? Why is it important? It's important because those people who see themselves, who are Irish here, need, and I don't mean needed as we want, we just want it. It's sort of to recognise your ethnicity, your identity, who you are. A language and a culture is central to all of that. So that's why a lot of the work has been going on here at grassroots. When we had a government here which was hostile, and I don't think there's any problem in using that word, to the development of the Irish language for many, many years. Now, in more recent years, we've had a change of direction, a change of mood, and a change of what's been said, but there's still a long way to go in that regard. So those people who worked through those hard years, this is in recognition of that. And as I say it, the reason why it's important, apart from just the sense of identity that it gives you, I was mentioning that I did some research some time ago for another project, and what I came across, and I think this is probably, the statistics are probably more or less still correct, 6,000 languages in the world and associated cultures, dying off at the rate of 1 per fortnight. That's what the statistics. I think it was a religious group. I think it was one of the religious groups who was doing a lot of this research, because they were. Anyway, the language is dying off at 1 a fortnight means that by the end of this year, the end of this century, 90% of all the languages and their associated cultures will have gone. Who wants to live in a world with 90% of the cultures gone? So therefore, it's our responsibility to develop, to defend, and to forward to develop the languages and the cultures in our own particular spot. And in this particular spot, the Irish language is one of the most important ones. If people want to go for Ulster Scots or whatever it is, that's fine. Everybody develop their own culture as they see it and as they feel it necessary. That's why all that work is important. And the final point on the whole thing was, I see the whole development of the Irish language in a world context. And there's always a danger with particularly the way things are sometimes presented here, that people become, it becomes narrow focused, and people say, oh, it's narrow nationalist sectarian almost, which is totally not the situation, but it can be presented in that. I don't see it in that context at all. I see it as part of a worldwide process of rolling back the problems caused by a process of centuries of colonisation, where the major colonising countries went around the world and destroyed the languages of the countries that they took over for a very important reason as far as they're concerned. In order to control people, you need to be able to communicate with them. And therefore, in order to communicate with them, they must understand your language. So it wasn't done accidentally. It was done with a clear purpose. And now we see throughout the world people trying to move away from that, to develop a process of decolonisation. And so we have the Black Lives Matter, and we have all sorts of things going on around the world in Africa and South America and other places where people are part of that process, trying to roll back from the harm that was done by centuries of colonisation. And I see our movement here as a small part of that we're trying to move back the colonisation process that happened here, and that the re-engagement with the Irish language is, and the development and growth of the Irish language is an important part of that. Okay, so Shannon Mage, thanks Dominic and Bill Best for the nomination, and Dominic for coming over all this way to bring it to us. It's a good job he didn't forget it. It would have convinced my April Fool suspicions, but anyway, Gurmagat is chacked. And thank you all for coming. I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting a small little thing. A box slid under the table and said, here you are. And Gurmagat Valigagus, Janimich, Foggy Mission Shine. Okay, Gurmagat.